Sometimes talking with friends feels like role-playing. Sometimes it feels like combat. Join us at the Round Table and Roll Initiative. This is Curmudgeons and Dragons.
Hello, adventurers. Welcome to Curmudgeons and Dragons. My name is Jason Portizo. As always, I am joined by Mr. Jim Crocker.
I think you mean Curmudgeons and Dragons Live.
You had that joke last episode.
I'm going to make it every episode because I am so happy that we are all together in the same room here. It's totally cool.
Josey's the one that's not live. It's like 3/4 live today. All right.
Yeah, we're doing great. One day I'll be live too.
Jim Crocker's here.
I am here. Yes.
Josey Diaz is here.
Hello.
Coming to us live via satellite. Is that a thing anymore? Jim and I are live in person at the Keep in Brick, New Jersey. Josey coming to us online from England, and we are here once again with Tony Bogan, owner operator of the Keep in Brick, New Jersey. My favorite FLGS.
Oh yeah,
that would be me.
We had a nice long chat with Tony for last week's episode, and we did not get into Tony's favorite game story. Mm-hmm. So is this more of a horror story, a wholesome story? What kind of direction are we getting into?
It's not a horror story. It actually starts off as the DM as antagonist.
Ooh. Is it an object lesson maybe, or a parable or a fable or something like that? It was more two
teenage boys that decided they were pissy with each other for about a week and then made up and then had fun with it. That's really what it comes.
Let's get into the story for the details, but I can already see it playing out.
Oh yeah. Let's get into the story and we'll decide how horrific it is.
So, little background for Josey or anybody that didn't see the store episode or got bored with me talking for so long for both the episode about the store.
Go listen to last week's episode.
Yeah. Also, you don't have to worry about that.
Don't quote me on that. I believe it's episode 109.
You cannot imagine how much of my shitty rambling Jason cuts out of the episodes.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
I was wondering why she doesn't talk that much. I'm sure.
I try to cut her entirely out of the show if I possibly can.
Listen, you just say the word and I'll go do my homework, babe.
No, she threatened to leave the show and I literally begged her. So, Tony, if you please.
Sure. So, amongst other things, I've been friends with my one friend Rich since we were 8 years old.
Wow.
And we've been playing D&D all that time. We started in 1976 playing D&D. And have played to this very day. So he's been my forever DM. And it would have been junior year in high school, so I would have been 17, just got my driver's license in November. So we had already been playing for almost a decade together. And two of my characters, Xandar Zan and Gleep Warp, which anybody that's a D&D fan that goes to old school knows that Gleep Warp came from the module Against the Giants. And after we were done playing that module, we liked the character so much that we kept it. Because he's actually a good wizard that becomes a bad wizard. Actually, they weren't called wizards back then. Wizard was a title when you reached a certain level. They were magic user.
Magic user, yeah.
Just general magic user?
That was all there is. The only class was magic user. Every other level, every other illusionist, wizard, archmage, mage, etc., were all a title that you got as you reached a certain level, just like going from corporal to sergeant to lieutenant to cap. That's all they were.
Oh, that's kind of cool, actually. I don't dislike that.
Man-at-arms, champion, hero, superhero. Yep. That was one of the things you could be as a fighter. So yeah.
But you were a fighter.
Yeah.
That was your actual class was fighter, or magic user, or thief,
or dwarf or elf.
Dwarf or elf was the class too. Yeah.
Right.
That's okay. All right.
So when we started first with the original, my white box edition in 1976. And then eventually we moved to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons when it first came out, which is now referred to as first edition. But at the time it was just AD&D. And we stuck with it ever since. So like I said, we had been playing for almost a decade by this time. And two of my original characters were two of the only characters that survived. If you look at my one character sheet for Xandar Zan, he's my half-elf fighter magic user thief because we were big into multi-classing. His list of fallen comrades is like half a page long. Of loose leaf paper, and because nobody survived. Also, side note, all of our original characters were named, interestingly enough, I don't know, Boromir, Gandalf, and we had Gimlis and all those. Yeah, because that was our world at that stage of the game, 8, 9, 10 years old.
There wasn't a lot of properties to borrow stuff from.
There wasn't. And then we made up, and I look at some of the names of some, like Hobar Mallow was a name that I came up with for another. Yeah,
not bad.
There was
Hobart?
Not bad.
Oh my God, wait, that's the name of the
Hobart. No
dishwasher.
T.
Oh, okay.
Just Hobar. Yep.
I just got so excited for a second.
So fast forward from when we started to junior year in high school, and for whatever reason, I got a phone call from Rich saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm kind of tired of Xandar Zan and Gleepwarp. They're way too powerful now. I'm just tired of them, and I don't want to. I don't want to play them, and I don't want you to play them anymore." I'm like, "Well, those are my two main characters." And as I had mentioned on the last episode, nobody played just one character at a time because there was rarely more than 3 or 4 of us max that would play at any one time. And you weren't getting out of the door of the keep in the village of Hamlet without killing yourself tripping over the door sill with just 3 players and 3-player characters. It just wasn't happening. Your 4 hit point magic user was powerful. He had 1 magic missile spell. It just wasn't a thing. So we typically played at least 2 characters each. So 3 of us would have an adventuring party of 6-player characters. I'm like, yeah, but that was the whole point, was we wanted them to literally go on forever, to the point where sooner or later our other player characters and other people that would come and we would play with would adventure in our world that our player characters created. All of a sudden it was our castle, it was our keep, it was our dungeon, it was our, village, whatever. So I was kind of annoyed, and I was like, why are you being such a jerk about this? Well, I want to blah, blah, blah. And it went back and forth. So we spent a week of almost not talking to each other, where the battle in D&D translated into a battle in real life. And it took about a week or 2 at the most. And eventually we kind of realized this was really stupid to be getting pissy with each other in real life over our player characters from D&D, but not completely, because it was my PC that had survived all of these trials and tribulations over the last almost decade. So eventually we said, well, how are we going to get past this? Because he wanted to have adventures and run adventures with new player characters or some of our lower level characters that we had created. If for no other reason, I found out because the 2 main characters were so powerful that they could take the low level characters with them and help them along. It's like, well, yeah, but that's what would happen. When you get a new job, they don't throw you in with another rookie and, just figure out how to do the work. Yeah, you'll figure it out sooner or later. Our business can survive with you guys putting the wrong parts in the wrong places. And no, you get somebody that's experienced, and you're under their tutelage, and they bring you along and they show. So that was my thinking of it, and I had thought was Rich's at the time. So eventually we decided, we'll make a challenge out of it instead, because we're not going to let this interfere with our friendship. It was stupid. We realized it was stupid, and so we decided to make a competition. A contest. You can, meaning me, Rich is like, you can do anything that your characters can do. But just remember, one of the rules of thumb that we always had was if it wasn't written down, it didn't happen. So
I'd be so fucked.
The point being that, there was times where we might not get to play for 2 or 3 weeks, but our characters, we wanted to still have their lives go on. So I couldn't just make stuff up. I would go to Rich and say, hey, for the last 6 months, so-and-so has been doing this and so-and-so has been doing that. And this is what they are. And here's the list of supplies that I bought, because eventually we got to the point of castles and strongholds and ships and the whole 9 yards. So Rich was one of those, well, I'm not going to do encumbrance down to the single GP weight of everything you're carrying. General encumbrance was an issue. I can't go out with no bags of holding and 10,000 pounds of gold pieces. Just not going to happen. So that was about the level that we did it to. But anything that happened out of the play when we were together, it had to be written down.
Did it also need to be did it also need to be proofread by your DM to be like, yes, that's acceptable that you did?
Oh, absolutely. No, I had to bring everything to him because like I said, I couldn't just make shit up and say, oh yeah, by the way,
while we were
I have
out,
that 40-foot solid gold statue now. They know that kind of stuff couldn't happen.
I love that this story is, so back when we invented downtime in D&D.
Yeah, right. Close.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that would have been 1986 when we had this fight. And we've been doing it for a long time.
That's a parallel development thing where everybody was like, well, the rules don't do this, but we want to do this.
Yeah.
And so everybody kind of figured out their own way to do it. I love that story.
In that vein, too, people don't realize the first edition, first printing of the Dungeon Master Guide had tables in it that were wrong. the math actually didn't add up. Now they were fixed in later printings and errata sheets.
Oh, Gary.
But the DMs guy came out in 78. I was 10 years old. We just figured we didn't understand it, so we just made shit up. Fast forward, like 5 years later, we'd look at it new and be like, oh, you mean that's how we were supposed to do it? Oh, we had no idea.
Whoops.
So, mind you now, at this stage of the game, my magic user, Gleep Warp, which I did not make that name up. He comes from the module Against the Giants. And we had played that module, and we liked the character so much that my DM let me keep him as my magic user. And Xandar Zan, who was my main character, who's the half-elf fighter magic user thief. They are now powerful enough to the point where there's no monster in the monster manual statted as printed that they couldn't defeat. We had kicked ass when Deities and Demigods came out. Oh, goodness. Which is called, what the heck was the reprint of that? Legends and Lore.
Legends and Lore.
The reprint. But originally it was Deities and Demigods. When I saw Elric was statted in there.
Was that title a victim of the Satanic Panic? You think?
Probably.
Yeah. And there was also, they also got sued because they included two pantheons they didn't have permission to use.
Didn't quite happen that way. It wasn't so much a lawsuit as it was there was
Stern talking to.
The same IP had been both Michael Moorcock's, who's in, by the way, a Michael Moorcock group that I belong to on Facebook that he's active in.
Yeah.
Which is why I brought up Elric, because when I saw they statted Elric in the Deities and Demigods, one of my favorite fantasy series of books. And I love the character.
Yeah, run around with Stormbringer.
God.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
That was why all our characters were chaotic alignment of some form or another. So at any rate, what happened with that was that both Michael Moorcock and I forget the name of the originator of the Cthulhu.
H.P. Lovecraft.
Thank you.
Chaosium stuff, yeah.
Right, all the Chaosium stuff. They had ended up that Moorcock's stuff had been, he agreed to allow both TSR and someone else, which I think it was Chaosium, to use it at the same time. And neither legal teams realized that the others had been promised the same thing. Yeah. So that's where that came from.
I knew there was some kind of fracas that it wasn't in subsequent editions of that book.
It was not. So, there's only 2 printings of Deities and Demigods, the first and second, that are 144 pages and have all of the pantheons in them. Yeah. Then every printing after that was only 128 pages and is missing those 2
that have Cthulhu statted out in it. Yeah. So again, uber powerful characters, especially for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in the first edition at that stage of the game. Mind you, over the next 30 years since then, they've become even more powerful. Sure. So we still kept it interesting because it was like, all right, throw 10 dragons at us. Let's see what happens, because if we're going to lose, we learned long ago that anytime we would, what's your next move going to be? We would quote Monty Python and the Holy Grail, run away. Yeah. We learned a long time ago that was like the best move that any adventuring group can have in their repertoire was run away. Yeah. Not be afraid to flee when it's the right time to flee.
It took about a dozen player character deaths before we finally got that through our thick heads, but we did realize it. So as long as it was written down, any of the stuff that I had, whether it was strongholds we had made or stockpiles of stores and things like that, and the same thing, we could do it, we could use it, it would be accessible to us. And the same thing was true with Rich. He could do anything to us, to the group, to the player characters, as long as it wasn't how did we say it before? You can't kill the party by blowing up the planet.
Yeah,
like you have to give us a fighting chance.
Sure. Okay.
So no meteor shower that, there's a meteor storm and the one rock hits the bigger, twice the size of what wiped out the dinosaurs, so you're all dead.
Intergalactic rocks fall, everyone dies.
Yeah.
So after about, we typically did at least twice a month. We tried to adventure more together, but we played at least twice a month at that stage of the game because by then we had sports and girlfriends and cars and that kind of stuff coming into the play. What happened was Rich realized that there was basically almost no amount of demons, gods, you name it. Like we couldn't necessarily defeat a god on their plane of existence.
No amount of playing fair that would
exactly right.
That you guys couldn't handle.
So or run away from.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
When you've got
that's handling it.
When you've got a 30+ level magic user, he's really tough to beat. It doesn't matter that he was a human and doesn't have a whole lot of hit points.
Sure.
And teleport is a great way to get away from stuff, especially when your character's been around long enough that he can move large quantities of, whether it be humans or pack mules or whatever,
with the snap of a thumb.
You get your high-level cleric with Word of Recall.
Yeah.
That's also very handy. Put a contingency
dwarf, by the way.
Yeah,
my cleric is a dwarf. So at any rate, so Rich decided, all right, well, how am I going to do this? Well, one of the things that we never realized when we first started playing as 8 and 9-year-olds was we only did high fantasy. There was no gunpowder. There were no, nothing mechanical or machinery beyond it. Typical, medieval style stuff. There was no guns, nothing like that. But when the module Expedition to the Barrier Peaks came out, which we looked at it, and in the picture of these adventurers, and one of them's holding what looks like a ray gun, shooting a laser at something. Like, you can do that,
right?
That was like 12-year-old us going, wow, we didn't know you could. So we can do Star Wars with Dungeons and Dragons. So then nothing was off the table for us, even though we didn't typically integrate those things into our campaigns on a regular basis. They were there for us. So Rich decided, how am I going to beat these guys? Aliens. Aliens was the answer.
That's a great solution.
So at this stage of the game,
he went the Dragon Ball Z route. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, see, and for me, unfortunately for me, or fortunately for me, depending on which way you look at it, I was never big anime style cartoons. So one of the only ones that existed when I was a child was Speed Racer, and I was not a fan of Speed Racer. And then I saw
product of his time.
And then I saw Star Blazers when it came out. And if you don't know what Star Blazers is, at 30 seconds or less, I'm a huge World War II buff. So picture aliens bomb planet Earth with meteors, make the surface uninhabitable. So humans are below the surface, but we've got to get off our planet and get to a friendly planet in order to get the cure to fix our planet. So there's the battleship Yamato sitting on the bottom of the now empty, dry Pacific Ocean. They rebuild it from the bottom up. So the old rusted shell is on the outside of it. And then it breaks through when it comes out. And they've got a World War II battleship that's now a spaceship and shoots lasers out of the turrets and everything.
That is so aesthetically pleasing to me. I love
that.
Well,
and I loved it.
Bananas. It's
as
great.
A child.
Yeah.
So that was kind of where Rich got the idea from was, well, you're big. And so, they'll just be lasers and there'll be bombs and they'll be like, now what do I do? So what happened was, and we were also big into Battlestar Galactica, the original with, Lauren Green and the whole 9 yards. So all of that tied into what he planned. So what happened was the aliens came and they landed on my island because my guys had an island that we had taken over, and that was where we built our stronghold and had our ships and the whole 9 yards. So when push came to shove, the only alternative was get the hell out of there because we just could not compete with the aliens' technology. Because even the most powerful flames and the most powerful magic shields, sorry, just not going to happen. So my characters had to hightail it out of there. So while we were still alive, it'd be like you and me being picked up and dropped off onto a desert island with no resources, just your wits about you, because all of our resources were in our stronghold. Or so my dungeon master Rich thought. Because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So out came the book.
Yep.
And the pages with the lists of all of the stashes that we had.
Which, for those of you who are not watching on the YouTube right now, the actual book is here and intact. Which
How old is this book?
This binder there's Tony's 12-year-old hands writing one of the character sheets for Xandar's hand. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
That's so cool. I can't keep notes between sessions.
And there's the stronghold on graph
that's
paper.
crazy.
Wow. Oh, yeah. So
if it's cool with you, I'd love to get a.
I have scans of it. Oh
yeah, okay.
It's all been digitized. Oh, trust me, it's all been digitized.
We'll find a way of including that in the show notes. Go check the show notes and click on that to see what we're seeing right now.
So we had enough that we could, at least as far as Rich was concerned, we had enough resources accessible within a reasonable distance to get to rearm ourselves, things like that.
Well, because the flip side of if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen is. If you did write it down, it did.
It did happen.
So
absolutely.
Whether Rich remembered that you had written it down or not. So
it was all there.
You go. Yeah.
It was all there. So one of the things that had happened in 5 or 6 years earlier was, I don't know if any of you are familiar with from the Monster Manual, mites, MITES. Oh yeah.
I'm familiar with real world mites.
Right. There you go. The best way I can describe it is, if you remember, I'm looking at you guys because you're closer to my age. The gremlin from Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, sure.
Right. Well, gremlins were a thing, especially during World War II. Anytime someone it must have been gremlins. Gremlins must have done it.
That was based on the Twilight Zone gremlin.
So
also Gremlins, great movie. Gave me nightmares as a child. I fucking loved it.
Oh yeah.
Gremlins 2, not so much.
But why? In my family was still somebody will turn a light and somebody will go bright light. My voice doesn't go that high, so I can't make it sound like
bright light.
That's closer to it. Damn,
Josey starts that high.
Yeah, I just
we had come across a bunch of these, so they're nefarious little creatures, and they're just brutal, and they're closer to gremlins, to be honest with you. In the 1E monster manual, they're even drawn similar to that. So my one powerful magic user, Gleeporp, had been we had come upon nests of these things that were being kept by some bad guy that was, you would use them and send them into towns to, wreak havoc, which we thought was a great idea. So we took it for ourselves once we defeated him. So we basically farmed them. So we had mass quantities of these things that we would sell to passing adventure. Like, hey, got a problem at home? There used to be snake oil salesmen. We sold the mites. Mm-hmm. Hey, you got a problem at home? You're having trouble? Come get a couple of these, pay us for them, and let them loose and wreak havoc. And then you can, come in and be the big savior. And so long story short, the problem we were having was, even though we were off the island and we had our strong, our stashes of gear and money and things like that, everywhere we went didn't last very long, because what could the aliens do? Fly in spaceships. So there was no place that was inaccessible to them, even though it might be inaccessible or difficult to get to for us. There was no hiding from them to any great degree, because their scanning technology could, underground wasn't going to help us. It might give us enough time to get out before the bombs worked their way through, but there was no getting away from it. So now it was simply a matter of, it was a chase. It was a cop and robber chase scene for the next few sessions of us always trying to stay one step ahead of the antagonists that were following us one way or the other. And of course, we could teleport, but they had beaming technology. So one minute it was a ship in the sky, and the next minute it was 100 troops on the ground with laser guns and shields. I'm like, damn. So we just couldn't figure a way to get around it. And finally, after probably about 6 weeks of this, and again, we played, 6 sessions of, not 6 weeks, six times that we met up playing, typically 4 or 5 hours at a clip. I figured, you know what? I've got to get rid of these aliens before I can start to do anything. So we did a mass teleportation of thousands of mites onto the airfield that used to be my island to the spaceship. And my exact thinking was, that's what the gremlin did in Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
When Bugs Bunny comes into frame, there's the gremlin with a giant shell, artillery shell, hitting the head of it with a hammer, trying to get it to explode. And that's exactly what my thoughts were. So we teleported them not anywhere near where the alien, to the spaceships. Mm-hmm. To all of their fighters and everything that were on my island. Fortunately for us, it did the job, that it wreaked the kind of havoc that we were hoping for. But because of the roll of the die, there was a 10% chance that there would be a catastrophic result. We agreed 10% was a reasonable amount. And I didn't roll well.
Dice tell a story.
So what happened next? We got rid of the aliens and the entire island as well, because they basically set off a nuke in screwing with the spaceships. So now the entire island is gone, completely gone. It's just a crater underneath the water now. So that was when the second, where if it wasn't written down, it didn't happen, comes in. So Rich was like, all right, well, now what are you going to do? Because a lot of those stashes that you had, as the aliens would catch up to us, they would take them out. And that was when the pad came out and said, remember this one with all the stocks and stores? Because he would stick with, certain spell components that were vital spell components.
Yeah, that's fair.
We had to have not every standard root and things like that.
That's fair.
But if it was a rare gem, or if it was a rare root, or it was a bat wing of a certain thing, we had to have that stuff if we wanted to use it with any regularity. Mm-hmm. And the same thing went with other stores. Same thing with our ship. Like, part of that map that I held up to the screen briefly in my stronghold, there's a whole section there that's nothing but farmland. Because if I'm going to have all these barracks with troops that go out on these ships, how are they going to eat? So we had, we would do that. We would only do it once, though. Once it was done, it was assumed that it would continue to be done.
Sure.
Once we came up with a general cost of what it would cost to maintain something per week or per month, not with the regularity that would be required in real life. But every once in a while, Rich would be like, it's probably time to chalk off another 5,000 GP for keeping your stuff inside.
Sure.
So enough to make it where you didn't just get everything you wanted for free, and you couldn't have, like I said, you couldn't carry 10,000 GP with no bags of holding, things like that.
Sure.
So that's when the list came out, and it was, now here's the real list of stock in stores that we had hidden away.
Wow.
Because we had accumulated so many magic items, for example, over the course of almost a decade of adventuring that we never needed most of them, because we realized once you got to a certain level, you could get away with not having to have all of that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So we had massive, and of course, what did we do? Well, we rolled the dice. We rolled the percentage die was both our friend and our enemy. What are the chances that of these 20 different, stashes that you have scattered about, how many of them haven't been looted in the time since you put them in there years ago? Well, we tried to account for that as best we could, because what we would do is, again, and this was only because we had high level characters that could do it. You dig a hole, get rid of a huge area, clear out a room. We learned you could teleport dirt out of your way too, which worked great.
For sure.
And then seal it back up. And it was 40 feet below the dungeon that you built above it. And there was only one way to get there, was to teleport there. So we did stuff like that. So we would put 500 GP worth of stuff where it was readily accessible, put a monster or two there to guard it, and then now it was done. Nobody was going to dig down 40 feet to try and look for, no NPC was going to do it.
Sure.
So that was where that came from.
The classic Tomb of Horrors fake tomb.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Oh, like I told you earlier, we didn't play a lot of the modules, but we pulled from all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's good tech. Yeah.
The funny thing is that later in life, one of my favorite TV series, Babylon 5, there's the evil shadows, and one of the ways that they get rid of the presence of the shadows on one of the planets where they're, have taken over is secretly overnight. They have citizens that, while they're evacuating most of the population from this one island that they were on, that their ships were on, they secretly brought nukes in and left some people there who sacrificed themselves so the shadows didn't notice that there were people missing, and nuked the island. I was like, wow. J. Michael Straczynski must have looked at our damn adventure before he wrote that. But it was like I said, it started off as a fight. It turned into a challenge. And by the time it was done, it was like, we really are almost starting over.
It's a whole campaign. Yeah.
And we had a blast with it.
That's awesome.
But so that was I guess I couldn't really come up with a horror story. Was there the building that fell on top of one of my characters? I've got a million of those because especially, like I said, in the early editions. And it was one step above. I mentioned, you couldn't survive tripping over the door sill as you walked out of the original keep. I had a couple characters that literally died that way.
Oh,
fell off their horse.
Amazing.
Only had 4 hit points to begin with.
Yeah. Yep.
And guess what? The way we played it was when you hit 0, you were unconscious. Anything less than 0 was dead.
Oh, okay.
We did there, and there were no rules really that were at that stage of the game. We were kind of rules heavy when we started because, again, we were 8, 9, 10 years old. So there was a lot of imagination, but it didn't always make sense. So we would fall back to the rule, like, how do we do that? Well, let's look up the book and see what it tells us to do. But I had more than one character that did that. So, but those horror stories were, yes, I had a character that was riding on his horse, and when he fell off the horse, he had 4 hit points, and he hit his head on a rock and he died. There's my horror story.
End of story. Right.
It's a true story,
Yeah.
but it wasn't very interesting. So the best thing I could think, and like I said, the fun part was
I'll
it
accept
started.
That, Tony. I'll take a horror story that's 5 seconds long.
Yeah, well, I just
There's
gave
our
you
episode
one
today.
Yep,
Okay.
That's it. Thanks for watching.
Yes.
We hope you enjoyed yourself today. And again, those 2 characters are still alive to this day.
Yeah. In that binder.
I gotta somehow spin that out into half a dozen notes, though. So we gotta figure out what's going on. Okay. All right.
All right. Tony, not really a horror story or a more wholesome story than anything else. With
fun.
This is just this is a solid game story.
Yeah.
But if you can imagine,
this is war stories.
Two 17-year-old, right? 2 17-year-old friends that have known each other for as long as they've been playing D&D together. Actually, it would never get to fisticuffs because Rich is 5 foot tall, like 5'1".
Hey, short people are scrappy. That's how he and I became
friends. Oh, I'm with you, yeah, but you can't tell. I'm 6'4", 220 back then, so more than 220 now. That's how Rich and I became friends. He was the new kid in school, and this one kid, Mark, who was my size, was picking on him in gym class. And you didn't pick on the little kids because there was no challenge. Can't waste your time.
Can't punch down.
And I got pissed.
Yeah.
So I, got in a fight with Mark and got in trouble for the fight, but didn't care. And then Rich and I were friends ever since.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, right.
Thanks for the story, Mark.
Seriously. I didn't say Mark's last name. But,
that's great.
And then, that was part of the game, was us doing stuff together because we found out the best part is Rich that same day in school. The reason we were in the gym was because it was raining, so no recess outside. And
I remember those days.
You remember the old brown paper bag style book covers that you had to put on your books back then? You might remember it.
Oh, yeah.
Actual paper bags, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, it was just brown paper on it. So Rich had been sitting in class reading a book.
Aggressively customized those brown paper covers.
And this was one of my friends who, Mark, I had not been friend, but this was all what led to us becoming DM and player, et cetera. One of my friends, Joey, and one of my other friends, Jason, no offense, but it's the name.
Let me hear the rest of the story before I'm offended.
Okay. They decided, Rich, again, new kid, quiet, doesn't know anybody. And of course, I had gotten in a fight with the kid Mark while we were in the gym and when we were back in there. So they wrote on their brown paper bag textbook book covers and walked around pretending to be nerdy. And what did they write on? They wrote what Rich was reading, and he was reading Dune, which I had just finished reading about 6 months earlier.
And now it's cool to read Dune.
Well, sure. I'm like, wait a minute. What do you guys like? That's good. That's cool. Like, so we had all of these things in common. We like Dune. We started playing D&D together. We did so. He was one of two. I had two best men when I got married because
that's awesome.
Rich I knew from grammar school. My friend Dave I met in freshman year in high school, and again still friends to this day. And I wasn't going to pick between the two of them, so I took them both. So
you're the best man and a pretty good guy.
Pretty good guy, and an almost excellent guy. So yeah, D&D stories I could give you a billion of, but that was the one that was not only the biggest challenge for us, but one that, like I said, it started as a, why are you being a dick?
Yeah.
To, well, you know what we could do with this? Where can we go from here with that? And we turned it into its own adventure.
No, that started as like just a solid game story and then turned into a wholesome story. So I think I'm nice and satisfied with this. Once again, Tony, owner of the Keep in Brick, New Jersey. That's my friendly local game store. So you should go check that out. It's thekeephobby.com.
That's correct.
Which I don't think we said in the last episode.
We did not.
But it's going to be in the show notes anyway, so they'll find it. But thekeephobby.com. Check out their event schedule because you can find one-shot games run by me and a couple other DMs as well. But find mine and come fill my table up.
If you would just stop working for a living, you could do a whole lot more one shots.
Listen, I work in an industry that eats up all my weekends. I'm so sorry. But Tony, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
If you find other stories, we'd love to have you back. And of course, Jim, Josey, thank you so much for always being a part of this.
Oh yeah.
That's gonna wrap it up for today.
All right.
Thank you, adventurers.
Thank you for listening to Curmudgeons and Dragons. Please share this with your favorite adventurers. Leave a review on Apple and follow us on social media. All links can be found at curmudgeonsanddragons.com. Practice safe adventuring, my friends.